several successful projects in ancient history. But it seems like when we get to the 1900s and then up to today, the 2000s, um, it seems like our urban design isn't really as good or doesn't improve the quality of life as much when compared to the ones in like the 1800s. In chapter 10 of Moten, he describes how the modernist movement in the 1900s and the automobile have negatively impacted urban space. So I have some few visual aids here. So when Moten says designing for people, he means that there should be more public participation. There should be more sort of sensitivity in not just like the planners and the architects, but also the government as well. This is, he highlights in the first part of chapter one, um, His Royal Highness, that's what HRH stands for, Prince of Wales said that really like highlighted the importance of public participation in Britain. So he talks about all we get at the moment is more talking, but we need is really real development solutions on the ground. And this is what this graph here is for, this section here is for. And then it talks about this analytical framework. I'll just go to the summarized version over here. So over here, we have sort of five rows with several what do you call this? Five columns with several rows, sorry. We have techniques of participation, levels of participation, a political system, the spatial units, and the mode of planning. So very quickly, the first column talks about the different, what do you call this, methods of eliciting or encouraging participation in your local community. So what Moten found in cities in the 1800s, there was a lot of, I wouldn't say there was a lot of participation, but the government had a lot of power. But at the same time, they really cared about the health and welfare of their citizens, which is really a stark contrast to what's going on in the Philippines today. So the Filipinos in general feel disenfranchised and like not included at all with the participation of the design of the urban environment. So if you look at our samples over here, things to grade, 3200 local community. I'll just click on something random here like this one. So you see baywalks, national highways, sidewalks. Like when was the last time you've heard that the community actually influenced the government on how they design these spaces? Based on your experience, anyone can jump in. Do you think your local area was sort of influenced by your local community? Yes or no? Just like a few people in the class to say yes or no. Anyone? It seems like wala. Let's just bring up Cebu City. Let's see here. Cebu City should be somewhere around this one. No, that's Bohol. This is, let's say Guadalupe. So looking at the streets of Guadalupe, it seems like it's just pavement, no sidewalk. Pavement, no sidewalk again in Virama. 912 Virama, 969 Virama Avenue. 912 has a bit more sidewalks. This is probably because it's closer to the city center. 969 has lesser sort of sidewalks on one side only. Abeliana exit, or like extension, sorry, has a sidewalk on one side, but has been occupied by, let's say, small commercial spaces. And then in 757 Hervasio Quijida Street, there are no sidewalks and it's just a road. And then our earlier example here in Bislig City, we have a really like well-developed Baywalk area, a national highway with, it seems like no sidewalks, so it's really for cars, highway only. And then we have here Braca Street. Let me zoom in a bit more. It seems like there are some sidewalks, but they get used up for, again, commercial spaces and private property. They have some existing rivers and another sort of like riverside walking area. So this one has it's definitely a landscape architecture urban design project. So you can see steps going toward the river. So that's an example of like a good urban design. And what will make it sort of stand the test of time is that if the local community actually participated in the creation of those spaces. So let's look at Cebu City. Let's see, Osmeña Boulevard, I think one of the better streets in Cebu City. It has an island, two sidewalks, and also street trees. Colon Street has arcaded areas usually. So that means it's covered sidewalks and no street trees, but I think it's fairly, what do you call this? It's fair to say that it's a successful urban space because people use it, and it's really a space for the people. General Maximum Avenue, this is closer to the city center. You can see some sidewalks, but clearly what do you call this? It has been overtaken by private space and spaces for cars. So more parking lots than people walking in this area. So not a very people-centric urban design. Let's see, what have we here? Kamputha River, there's a sidewalk, there's some railings, and the quality of the river doesn't seem to be very good. Mahiga Creek, sidewalks, railings, but again, the river doesn't seem very clean. Although you see some setbacks being applied away from the river. And MJ Cuenco Avenue, I think there are some sidewalks, but it has been built on top of or like claimed by private property, so it has become like so just like parking spaces for buildings. So you can see the variety of like a large city like Cebu. Some areas have sidewalks, some areas have very poor urban design, and some areas are like somewhere in the middle. So how do we create better urban design? And it's really what Moten describes a balancing act between public participation and government sort of execution or like government follow through, I would say, because the idea should come or like the initial impetus or the initial idea should come from the people and there are different levels of this. And then the higher the level, sort of um, let's see, you have community administration, self-build, community planning and design, political manifesto, public meeting, public inquiries, planning appeals, exhibition, and all the way down here to anthropological study. So at number one, this is the least amount of sort of the least hassle or the easiest community administration. You just leave them alone, let them design whatever they want. Self-build, so something similar, and then all the way here to the bottom, it's like the most sort of controlled or the most difficult to do. You do a full-blown anthropological study. You analyze the behavior patterns and culture of an area, and that's how you sort of determine what kind of urban design they need. And then at level two, you have citizen control at number one and manipulation at number number eight. So this is a what Moten calls the ladder of participation. This was first sort of highlighted by a writer, Sherry Arnstein, in the 1969 publication of Journal for American Institute of Planners. And then they put over here that on the lowest level, non-participation and sort of manipulation are like the worst levels of citizen participation. So basically, you're not telling them what you're actually doing, you're manipulating them, or it's something very surface level, very like just saying that we'll do this, we'll do that, and that's what they call like therapy in this like ladder. Tokenism, it seems like it's still participation, but at a still not a very good level. So just placating or like servicing a very small portion of the community and taking their opinion to sort of decide a master plan for an even larger community. And then the highest level is citizen control, delegated power, and partnership. Basically, the community is working together with whoever is developing that area so that their needs are being met and it ensures that they'll use whatever is designed or created in that space. And very interestingly over here, I'll just switch to the module. Now, manipulation is all the way down here on 8. And then citizen control is up here, the highest degree of citizen power. And then it seems like uh, what this table is trying to do is that more citizen control sometimes, or like what this table is saying, would probably lead to anarchy and very small sort of spatial planning or non-plan. Meanwhile, a more controlled level of participation, um, maybe the best one here would be partnership, community planning, and sort of the thing that always happens is placation, consultation, and informing, just like informing them, or there'll be a new road here, informing the public, there'll be a new carbon market over here. And then the political system that usually enables this kind of planning is usually representative democracy, which is like sort of the mid-level. And the spatial units being designed will be district quarters, towns, cities, regions, and nations. So we talked about regions and nations last sem. And then the mode of planning is structural planning, basically like um, just a step below master planning. So it's not super detailed, but it's like it's better than no plan at all. So the area highlighted here with the broken lines is what usually happens, and the area highlighted here with the hatching, that's supposed to be the ideal. So partnership with the government, the political system is a participatory democracy, meaning the public actually gets to participate. The spatial units focus will be housing, street design, neighborhood design, and the modes of planning should be action plans and incremental planning. So remember, we talked about last week where Camilio site advocated for incremental planning, more, what do you call this? Um, More step by step and not like large master plans out of nowhere, similar to what's happening with Cebu's carbon market. And then also notice that within what is happening versus what is supposed to happen, there's a intersection. So mix scanning is included in both the ideal scenario and the realistic scenario. So there is a possibility that all these different techniques, all these different levels and political systems and spatial units can be sort of regulated and managed in a way where you can get a desirable result. So mix scanning or uh, mix planning, basically. And then you always see over here on the last section, architectural style. So it's more, it fits within the range of formal and informal and ad hoc architecture, unless what they call geometrical or axial, basically sort of totalitarian governments over here, similar to what happened with Rome. That's why all the buildings are very like strict because the government had so much power. What we're advocating for in this class is not a totalitarian government, but a participatory democracy. So it basically means what it says: people to participate in the government, and like that should lead to better planning. And then the main issue for the Philippines is I think the general public has become very apathetic to projects because they feel like the government won't listen to them anyway, or the power really lies with the developers, those who are um, proposing the plans, the private entities who have the money to implement those plans, and the general public is just sort of there to watch what happens. Now, the problem with this kind of planning is you get housing units that look really good on paper and they're built, but in the end, nobody occupies them and they have to be demolished. So I'll switch over to Pruitt Igo over here, and I'll just show you the demolishing part. So I'll just mute this video. So you can see this is Pruitt Igo over here, about 11 buildings, about 12 stories high. And it's supposed to be social housing. And you can see here in the video, it's very good, not really excellent quality, but it's of decent quality. It's not poorly made by any means, just from looking at it. But what happened was the developers and the planners behind it, um, I think they didn't go about the, what do you call this, the participation very well. So the design building, although very up to code, up to standard, did not meet the needs of the people who lived in that area. So they envisioned like people playing out here, etc. Very like healthy families. But what ended up happening was the people who lived here were basically um, what do you call this, ostracized urban poor families, which mostly constituted Black American families. So there's like a flavor of racism going on in these developments, and they were erected, I think, in the, let's see here, did I write? I think this was erected around like 1940s. Lower Town built in 1940s, which didn't suffer from Let's see here. Pruitt I go. Let me just double check my dates. Let's see. I'll just check the wiki page faster. Da-da-da. So built in the 1960s and demolished by the 1970s. So this was in St. Louis, Missouri in America. So just like for context, let's take a look at that. Do-do-do. So this is where St. Louis is, right? Like near the center of, um, more to the eastern side of America over here. That's St. Louis over there. So let's talk about housing in the Philippines. So what are our housing codes over here? We have PD 957. We talked about last SEM because you had the, oh no, not last SEM, last year because you had the housing development. We have subdivision guidelines here. Let's switch to the minimum lot size. You have duplexes, you have row house, but you don't have sort of mid-rise buildings because even in the 1970s Philippines, we realized that this type of housing would not be feasible. We could make like mid-rise buildings, but who would be able to afford it? So if you want to make like housing for the lower income to middle income class, you really have to go for row houses and what do you call this? Duplex type. And the other code that we have here is, forgot the socialized housing. Housing Philippines. Let's see. Code Philippines. That's BP 220. So 220. I have it over here. Socialized and economic housing. Let's look at the housing types. So again, row house and duplex and single detached. Single detached, duplex, and row house. Just repeating it again. So no mid-rise, sort of medium density buildings or even like high density buildings, similar to what's going on here. Close this. In Pruitt I go. So luckily, our code does not allow for these types of socialized housing developments. And I think we should avoid that unless there's something truly groundbreaking that we actually need these. Um, so far, the situation in Cebu City isn't so dire that we need like high-rise housing. So let's look at Cebu City. And probably this it will be the same for your different municipalities and cities as well across the country. But I think Cebu City, even though it's like super kind of crowded already, row housing type or like small density housing is still, I think, very feasible. Something like this. So you see here, this is, what's the name of this area? Mm, mm, mm. If I can get the name to pop up. Uh, excuse me. This is, geez, the name doesn't pop up at all. I'll just put the coordinates here. Mambaling. Copy the coordinates. Share. Copy link. I'll put it in the chat over here. Okay. This is actually a project by USC, Socialized Housing. This was designed by the IPD Center under architect Ravina. And you see the different sort of duplex type housing. And I think for the most part, it is successful, unless I need to like double check with the IPD. So instead of living in these like shack houses, now they have indoor plumbing. They have two-story sort of like family unit types, and then they still have access to their livelihood, which is like the fishing area over here. I think they ride their boats out into sea and then they come back and live here. They also have like a community center over here and a sort of like um, community hall. I think this is a green roof structure over here. So it's a lot more sanitary and they should be a lot more healthy, and that means they can like work more and be more productive, etc. So why do you think that I have like 20 people here? Hopefully one of you answers. Why do you think that housing is important for urban design and city planning, or basically just community architecture as well? Why do you think this is important? It's very easy to know why it's important.
I think, sir, I'd like to try, sir.
Mm-mm.
I think it's so that like everyone will have a designated like place to stay, and then like there won't be that much slums, or like slums will not exist, something like that, sir.
Mm,
Not really
mm.
sure.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one point because slums are what do you call this? The number one problem with slums is it's unsanitary and it impacts the health of the citizens. So what we're trying to do is improve the quality of life. So it's like really up here in the beginning. So you got it. So improving the quality of life of the citizens in the local community. And what happens when we improve their quality of life if they become more productive and they contribute more to the city? And this is something that is very kanang puzzling bitaw. Like if you think about it, the people who work in the city, um, the sort of that do the tasks that make the city work, like cleaning the streets, um, farming to get food for the city, fishing to get food for the city, doing the menial jobs like cleaning, janitorial services, construction work. Even we need a lot of like carpenters, laborers. They usually come from the sort of quote unquote low income sector. And a reason why our buildings and like our other sort of quote unquote higher end structures are not really being built in the same quality as they were 50 years ago is because our labor pool, the people who were hiring to work for us, their housing is very bad. So they don't get to work, they don't get to, they're not as efficient as they were like 50 years ago because they're living what they call this areas are very bad, so they feel neglected, and then of course that impacts the city in the long run because the people providing services, providing food, are not able to live in quality housing. This is what like developed countries in Asia like Singapore and even China, Malaysia, and as well as the super developed countries like America and Australia, and of course, I also let's put China on that list. They take care of the sort of the lowest ranked people in their society, the low income people. They have proper housing, so this affords them like um, better opportunities to move up from low income to middle income, like raise their quality of life. And once everyone is sort of moving away from poverty, the city also develops in the long run. Like large, we're thinking about city scale now, so it's a good thing. It's really important. It should be the priority of every city to provide housing for its citizens because who works in the city? It's the citizens, the teachers. I don't think that the teachers live in slums here, but I know some who might not be living in the best conditions because like several situations that doesn't afford them to live in better quality homes. Um, our laborers, good ang number one, ato mga carpenters, mason, the people who make our houses. It's so kanang sad without to think that they're able to make these like quality single detached houses for um, the 1% basically, and they go home and they live in shack houses, and we have all these mayors and governors that say, "Oh, I'll build more housing," like senators, presidents, housing, 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 but it's still not enough. Like they have so many plans for never it never gets implemented. So that's what I'm trying to say. Now we here as students and teachers in the academe, we should be constantly looking for new ways to make projects like this happen, because just looking at this area of Cebu City, um, we could really benefit a lot of people. And in helping them, we also help ourselves. So that's the whole point of this module over here. So one good thing though, we didn't build any multi-story housing units that had to be demolished. So that's why I highlighted this. There, it's not all bad in the Philippines. We haven't made like um, a lot of mistakes. Our only problem is we haven't sort of tried enough to make housing happen. So yeah, that's basically it for this issue. Before I get a little more political, this is why urban planning and urban design is very political, because we're trying to serve the public and we have to work with local government basically because they're the one in charge of protecting public interest, because the private companies only care about their profits because that's why they're private companies, and we can't tell them to like lend out money. We can ask for donations, but we can't like sort of bend the law or like change the law to sort of take money from private companies and private individuals, because that becomes sort of like socialism, totalitarianism in like extreme cases. Like your money is now mine, we'll use it for the public. That's socialism, communism, all that bad stuff that we don't want. So we have to work with the current system that we're in, which is, as I mentioned earlier, not really completely hopeless, but we just need more energy, and then this energy should come from the academe, from the students, and hopefully this will inspire private developers to invest in public projects. And this is where we get this like partnership thing in the scale over here. So this is where we get the levels of participation will be at the partnership level, where we have private public partnership, we have community design and planning, and then we design at the home, street, and neighborhood level, and not just the district quarter, the town, or the city level. So similar to what's happening with the carbon market redevelopment. So this is a bit larger, and I'm still on the fence as to whether this was the best idea. Um, it looks very good on paper, like in theory, but we won't know until like maybe 20 years from now, if this was really actually a good idea, which also highlights another problem in urban design and urban planning. We really don't know the impact of our actions until 10, 20 years later. So that's why the studying, the planning, the analyzing part really should take up a lot of time as well. So I hope this project will succeed and similar projects across the Philippines, and we can only monitor and analyze it. So this is why this specific course is important. So we can take note of what's going on in our local community. That's why we have this activity over here. So you're sort of aware at what's going on at in your local community. You're aware that you have national roads, sidewalks, some roads with sidewalks, some roads without sidewalks. So you can identify, sorry, you can identify yourself. Is your community growing in a sustainable way, or is it being sort of left alone? Going back to the scale here, is it just anarchy, or is there some kind of incremental planning? Is there some kind of mixed use planning or some kind of structure going on in your city? And then we'll delve into this further in the coming weeks when we like dissect this chapter one. But I'll just skip directly to the chapter two about basic concept in urban design elements, because I think this will be more useful for you, especially for your design plates. So this is the second part of this discussion. Let me stop recording here. So it'll be a short video,